Good morning and welcome to Smashi Business. I'm Lubna Hamdan.
And I'm Richard Fitzgerald.
And today we've got a really good mix of stories for you guys. The Vice Chief of Content has had to cut a meeting about staff layoffs because of a flood of thumbs down emojis. That was incredible. And then the boycott continues on Wild and the Moon. The stores were almost empty over the weekend. We'll talk about that next. Bahrain's Mumtalakat has taken full ownership of McLaren Group. And three media stories we've got today, rather interesting ones though. Disney's ex-CEO has said there's no need for any ESPN partnerships. And the BBC, is it being squeezed out by online algorithms? We'll find out. And then lastly, but not least, NBC, in a surprise move, has grabbed nearly 14% of Anghami's shares just ahead of the merger with OSN.
Fascinating. Yeah, Monday morning, lots of fresh stories. It's the, I think we've got a couple of weeks more of Ramadan, but everything is, the weather's good. People are having iftars outside.
Yeah.
And
business is as usual, if not more.
It's not more. And like there's, I think there's, you know what, we were talking about it last week, the crossover between networking and life and business is just, it's just harmony now. It's not sort of, you can observe the holy month of Ramadan and get on with your life a lot as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people have a lot of iftar gatherings, and people have a lot of, we were both at a pop-up in Couture Reserve this weekend.
Yeah.
And there was, I don't know what number, but it felt like there was 60 or 80 young startup brands with their booths working till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Impressive.
It starts at 9, they're there at 7 setting everything up, and it ends at 2. And then they leave at 3 to pack up everything and go. And it was set up by two girls, two young girls.
They work for one of those fashion groups or something, was it? Or
I think one of them is ex-Shalhoub.
PR, and they set up. They call it a curated playlist, and this is their first pop-up, and they kind of flatten the cement area. Couture Reserve, where like Faya is, and a lot of these nice restaurants are in Maidan.
I had never been there before. I went just because of the pop-up, and that's great for the reserve as well. Yeah,
it's beautiful. People think that they'll flatten that because it's a development, but like it's such a nice area, it's such nice vibes in the evening.
Yeah.
And like the markets, but I was just taken in by, they're industrious, they've set up something, but then the clientele, what would you call them, the vendors, and the vendors are all like individual entrepreneurs. It's that real entrepreneurship. Most of them are female. Most of them are handcrafted products.
Most, if not all, are females. Yeah. And I mean, really interesting stuff. Like one of them is a vintage store. They still haven't launched the website, but they were there. Everyone was kind of flooding towards them because one of the co-founders travels to London and Paris and gets the best vintage stuff from there.
I actually saw them. They were beside the coffee.
Blue Moon Vintage.
Yeah.
So cool. I saw a Lanvin fur there for 7,000 dirhams, and it's on my list. I DM'd her. I'm like, do you have payment plans? Vintage, real vintage. Yeah.
It's interesting you say about payment plans, because I did observe, like years ago, it was almost impossible to do that. But fintech has come on so much. And if you went around the vendors, you would get, and you asked them who their payment partner was, you get a real sense of what's working in fintech in the region.
Yeah.
There was one, Falusi, a young Emirati guy set this up a few years ago. He used to be on the show a bit. And Lubna, like how the phone becomes the tap device. That's
Exactly.
Falusi. So there's no app that you don't even know what you're doing. You're just putting your card on the back of an iPhone. That's Falusi. That works. Then a lot of people had the Zena QR code.
Yeah.
There's also one called Zbooni. These are all vendor, merchant orientated fintech. And this is what's powering the individual. Like we talk about the creator economy, but there's a startup economy happening.
Absolutely.
That whether you're a coffee person, whether you're selling oils, whether you're selling hairbrushes, as Ham says, or whether whatever you're selling, or vintage dresses, like there's a route to market now that kind of, and the licenses are a lot easier,
Yeah, Dubai is making it really much easier to open a business.
Yeah.
It's actually harder to close a business.
Yeah.
than open a business.
True. But in the past, like, wherever, especially where I grew up, like, you didn't need licenses. You would go to a car boot sale or a flea market, and you would do everything in cash.
Exactly.
But that sort of like wheeler dealer approach wasn't really possible here. And now fintech plus Dubai is enabling this sort of wheeler-dealer thing in a regulated way, and it's great.
And I think there were a lot of influencers as well who have started their own businesses there.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that the influencers kind of turning into business people, because you have to give something of value as an influencer back instead of just content. And I think it's great for them as well.
But it did make me think when I spoke to a few of them. There was one Citizens of the World, a makeup brand that started in the US and are starting in the region, and it did make me think that maybe it's better to have a product than it is to have a beauty e-commerce marketplace, because products are tangible and you can build your own community and you can go direct to consumer.
Definitely. You know what? When after I launched Frankly magazine, I just said, you know what? I should have launched a product and not a service. It's it's much easier to sell a product rather than a service.
Because the value speaks for itself if the product's any good.
Yeah, exactly. So one day, that's my new dream. One day.
You've created value already here. So.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, thank you.
This is a product, not a service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you know who hasn't created value is Vice.
Yeah.
Vice have failed miserably in the region. There was a meeting, and I saw the video.
I think it's the COO. No, was it?
It's the chief content.
Content was it? I thought she was the chief operating officer. Okay.
So the chief content officer Corey, and then the chief executive Bruce
jumped in,
cut off the meeting. So she was leading the meeting, and she started talking about the layoffs and how Vice, the Vice publishing business is now going to operate as a smaller break-even business. It is no longer unprofitable, but it is a much smaller offering. And Vice, of course, had mentioned that they're going to lay off hundreds of employees, and people got really pissed off because her salary was approximately basically over $700,000 last year. And one user commented, "What a joke! They can't handle emojis." So just to give you guys some context, on Wednesday,
the video is a must-watch, by the way.
Yeah, and it's playing on the assets on this. Hopefully, it's there. So basically, just picture this: there's a meeting, and she's speaking to staff, telling them, that the business has had to downsize. Keep in mind her salary is over $700,000. People start putting up just a flood of thumbs down emojis. She gets really flustered, and then the chief executive interrupts her. He says, it's impossible to ignore the emojis from our side. Yeah. We're going to organize this in a way where we can actually give the information to people who want to receive it in the way it's meant.
Yeah.
Guess what, Bruce? When you're paying your content executive over $700,000 and the business is not doing well, that you've had to lay off people.
Yeah.
Obviously, people don't want to receive this information.
Yeah. There's I don't know if you can see my phone, but there's an article in the FD over the weekend called Quick Talk: Why Young Workers Are Refusing to Leave Their Jobs Quietly. And it is this documenting these firings and things like that.
Exactly.
So that's the kind of trend that's happening.
Instead of quiet quitting, it's loud quitting.
Yeah, quiet quitting was that sort of thing of like work to rule, doing nothing in the workplace and doing side hustles. But now when you're being fired and let go, you're definitely documenting it. And, it's this sort of, it just highlights more and more the need for good corporate governance, but also good corporate comms. The video scene of this Vice redundancy, and we don't know the full detail of who has been let go, but it did feel like a global call because he referenced different APAC markets and things when he kind of cut it off, and different departments and things like that. But it does sort of, it reminded me of a scene in Succession where Greg is like, on the video call in the last season, and he's just letting people go, and like they're shouting. You can see them shouting, but you can't hear them. And he's like, whoop, whoop, and he's just like in this cold, quiet room, and he's like walking out. But I think
so soulless. Yeah.
I think you've got some good stories about Shane Smith. I heard one over the weekend. I was listening to the YouTube book, and he was having a deal with Robert Kinsell, who's been in the region a lot lately. He used to be at YouTube, and now he runs Warner Music globally as CEO, I think. And so he was giving Vice money from YouTube in like 2010, but they met in the Aria hotel lobby in Las Vegas early in the morning.
There's always a story with Shane Smith and a lobby.
Right? And then he goes, hey, this is the anecdote in the book, really good book. And he's like, hey guys, do you gamble? And it was a minimum of $5,000 in, and then the deal was done. So they brought out blackjack in the middle of a YouTube Vice deal. It's not how we do business, but okay, Shane. So what do we know about Vice, right, in the region? We know that they set up Vice Arabia as an Arabic content play about 5 or 6, 7 years ago. We know that they did some sort of content deal with a publishing group based in Studio City. And I know that the individual is from the region and he's got other publishing titles.
Yeah.
I think Afghanistan, I could be wrong, but I know other places. So they begin with a B. So they did that first deal with Vice. Then there's a nice fancy Vice office in Yas Creative Hub in Abu Dhabi.
Right.
Much nicer than the Love in Abu Dhabi office.
A lot of stories about that office as well.
Yeah.
Quite scandalous
Is
stories.
there?
Yeah.
Like,
parties, drinking in the office.
In Abu Dhabi?
In Abu Dhabi. We're talking about Vice. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, allegedly. We're not, allegedly.
No, but the Vice culture has transferred to Abu Dhabi. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That 1991 Montreal street magazine culture, Shane Smith culture, great. And then in Saudi, there's this Jas district near Diriyah, outside Riyadh.
Yeah. And
they've got the nicest setup there, right? And there was a talk of a 50 million content deal where NBC, who's going to be one of our stories,
yes,
they invested in this content platform with Vice, and they were hiring heads of content to launch this youth-facing content platform that hasn't launched.
Exactly.
So, and since then, they globally announced that they were bankrupt. Some VC people tried to buy them out.
Yeah.
And a month ago, they said they're shutting down Vice.com. So they're becoming less of a publisher that people go to, and they're going to create content that they put out on other people's platforms. Yeah.
So they were once worth, by the way, $5.7 billion. Last May, they filed for bankruptcy, and they were sold for $350 million.
And that 5.7 billion isn't that long ago. It's within the last decade.
Yeah.
Like it's the...
Yeah. Sorry, but you know what? I just want to point something out. NBC, right? I mean, they were betting on Vice, even when it wasn't doing well. So why are you hiring betting on a content company, when they can't even master their content? So you're relying on them to make your content. You know what I mean? Just because it's a global name, Vice, it had already kind of lost its... I mean, this was, 2022, 2023. Vice was already not doing well.
Yeah.
And they were betting on it. And it was kind of like a last chance for them to really step up, and they didn't step up.
Because we have a small publishing business in Saudi and we were doing really well on Snapchat. I sent a WhatsApp to someone senior at NBC at the time questioning this. He didn't reply.
Okay.
Because I just felt like, okay, so we're like, I'm obviously not from the region, I'm an immigrant, whatever, but like, I was kind of saying, well, why back them? Why not find a young Saudi creator or whatever and back them?
Exactly.
But to the point
and
is,
yes, you're an immigrant, but it's still a local homegrown business. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's got no foreign ownership, like outside the region. So who aren't, but so basically, like the point is that hang on, to kind of give a positive thing on what NBC do is, there is expertise there, and sometimes it's a leadership thing, and sometimes it's hard to second guess where media is going. People the right leadership could turn around Vice. The right leadership can turn around Disney. The right leadership, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Legacy media, like Condé Nast are in the news this week. They've let unions into them in the US and they're not working anymore. And Condé Nast were in the news because they bought and sold Reddit, but they kept some shares. And their $10 million in 15 years ago or longer is now worth $1.8 billion in Reddit. But there's a lot of stuff like this. There's a turnaround story happening at CNN at the moment. Mark Thompson, ex-BBC, and the guy kind of credited with the New York Times turnaround. He's trying to turn around CNN under that whole Warner Brothers Discovery thing. So, you have to kind of give people, like if she's getting $700,000 a year, and in 2-3 years' time, she turns them around. Yeah. Great. It's not looking good right now, though.
Yeah. No, it's not. I just want to mention something because Shane Smith, one of the co-founders of Vice, he's such an interesting character. I just want to mention one thing before we move on to the next story. And I do think he's very iconic. But I think, unfortunately, you know, the vice culture, and you know, you always need someone who's sane. You always need like a voice of reason, and I think that's what Vice was missing. But anyways, when we did an interview with him ages ago, he said he ate a Kobe beef burger at the Burj Khalifa that made him cry. He said, "This is the greatest thing I had ever had in my entire life."
What's Kobe beef?
Kobe beef is a very expensive type of meat,
Yeah.
but the fact that he said the greatest thing he's ever eaten in his life was in the Burj Khalifa. So
yeah,
that's
good
great.
Story, good line. But speaking of the co-founder, the other co-founder is a guy from Pakistan, and he's spoken at events in the region. So there are. It's not all Shane Smith culture. The Vice probably and did good content over the years, and they're not. They are partially a victim of their own leadership struggles and culture, and partially a victim of the speed of change that media, like we're speaking here in a media company as if we're foolproof and we're never going to fail, and we can be just as well in the scrap heap in the future.
Yeah,
you know?
sure. I mean, I think also they wanted to hold on to that nostalgia and do, you know, real quality journalism, but you can do quality journalism, you just need to be faster with it. I think that was the issue, and I was struggling with that, to be honest, when I first joined here, that nostalgia of, you know, the website and the articles. Anyways, moving on, because we can talk about this forever, but and we're not going to spend too much on this, but over the weekend, obviously we have reported that the co-founder of Wild in the Moon and Come to Our 102 took an pro-Israel stance. There's a genocide happening in Gaza. People did not take a liking to that. They did not, you know, were not in favor of that, and they started boycotting the brand. So over the weekend, branches of Wild in the Moon and Come to Our were nearly empty on Saturday. What are your thoughts on that? Someone said something interesting, because you said earlier that maybe we should forgive her. She put out a desperate second apology over the weekend as well, but she did not in that apology mention Palestine, not even once. It angered people even more. Hint, hire someone for crisis comms, Emma Sauko, because that's not going too well for you. Someone said we need to make an example out of her. That's what someone said.
Yeah, I'm not like, you know, I'm not a big fan of making an example out of people in general in life. Like, I think you know, everyone should be treated with in the same way, and we shouldn't get caught up too much on. It's not fair. Like, would you like to be made an example of just because you're in the time at the moment calls for an example to be made of? And irrespective of, I know there's emotions around this, and I know there's a lot around this, but Dubai's economy is doing really well. Like, it's doing really well, and one of the reasons it's doing really well in a hot pot of a region is because it's remained neutral, and it attracts people here to remain neutral. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. Like, you know, Switzerland did well in Europe. Ireland always stayed out of wars. Like, I think there's a lot to be said. Like, we talk about safety. So I do think that, like, a lot of the people leaving comments, like, if we let them have all their own way all the time, where does the buck stop?
Sure,
you know,
absolutely.
How far do you go? Like, if we let them make decisions all the time, you know, and I do think there is a leadership thing there, and I do believe everyone deserves a second chance. I do think that crisis management does pass. You know, you know, is Wild in the Moon and her business being suffering? Absolutely. Like, it's clear it's suffering, and you know, and let's see what happens. But yeah, I wouldn't go whole on. Like, I'm personally, if you're asking me, I don't think that any one of us should decide whether she needs to be made an example of or not.
No, absolutely. I don't think any of us should decide that. But I think in terms of her businesses, I think the people will decide that, because they have a choice to go and not to go.
Of course, and that's totally their choice.
I think, to be honest, that's punishment enough, I think. You know what I mean?
But it sounds like we're calling for punishment. And, you know, I go back to this neutral thing, and, you know, know, if I was her crisis manager right now, I would say, focus on, if you deep down believe that there's nothing wrong with how you communicate in any of your actions, then stick true to yourself. You know, sometimes when leaders and when businesses, when something backfires, like, if say your product doesn't sell, right?
Yeah.
Is that because your product is bad? Or is it because the customers weren't there, or it was rainy, or it was wet, or whatever? and you have to make this choice. Either you stick to your product, you're blind to feedback like footfall, like if people aren't coming in, or you change your product. And I think in leadership, like if someone gives me feedback and says, hey, something about this isn't right, like then I would go, is there something fundamentally wrong? I'll give you an example, right? So someone will say, hey, Lovin Dubai, blah, 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 right? They'll have some gripe about Lovin Dubai. I can't get personal and offended on this. I have to look like, are we intentionally going out there to upset something, right? Have I briefed a young journalist to go and to stir stuff up, right? And it fundamentally, if that was never done, if that's just a circumstance of how people felt in the moment in the comments.
Absolutely.
And we deep down, Lubna, we don't have KPIs. You know, we don't pay content people to get more views. It's not commission based.
No,
Gawker, the one that was shut down by Peter Thiel and the Hulk Hogan sex tape, journalists were giving KPIs to get clickbait.
Yeah.
We never did that.
Yeah.
So if you're fundamentally structured to do something that might have a negative impact, like Facebook were growth at all costs, and they ended up having election fraud and all sorts of things because it was culturally baked in. The incentive alignment had a negative effect, right? So if you're doing something that has a negative effect, then you need to look at yourself and fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bottom line, and we shouldn't really judge that.
Yeah. I'm going to move on from this because you're very diplomatic, and I know you're saying the right things. I'm a little bit more fired up about this, but yeah, let's move on from that. So Bahrain's sovereign wealth fund Mumtalakat has taken full ownership of McLaren Group. That's great news for the region. We love to see that.
How much? Do we know anything?
We don't know the number.
Were they a private entity? They weren't public?
They were already McLaren's biggest shareholder. And they already own a majority stake in the McLaren Racing Formula One team. McLaren is the only racing team that competes in F1, IndyCar, Formula E, Extreme E, and esports.
Wow.
And they had been going through financial uncertainty, heavy losses. So for them, this is a big deal. So the region has come to the rescue of McLaren.
Yeah. With the business around F1, but the business around legacy automotive brands is fascinating because it's kind of like airlines, they kind of all need buyouts, and they all switch over. Like there's holding groups like the kind of Volkswagens and the Daimler groups, but then there's independent players who kind of come up to grabs, just like the Telegraph and media, like they come up for grabs and people kind of value it and they buy them out and they turn them around. Revenue 2022, about $750 million. Operating income, losses, they lost £334 million in 2022.
They weren't doing well at all.
Yeah, there's a couple of those legacy British brands like Rolls-Royce, Range Rover, Aston Martin, and some of them remain independent and some of them get sucked into holding groups. But this McLaren thing, I think how you described it, like people will think of the McLaren Formula One team, people will think of the McLaren we see on outside hotels in Dubai.
Yeah.
And other people will think of those new emerging sports that you mentioned. It's definitely a strong brand. And well done, McLaren. Well done, Bahrain.
Yeah, very exciting. Really exciting. Have you been to I know we're running short of time. We're going to move on to the next story. Have you ever been to the Formula One in Bahrain?
I've been to the track. They were a client years ago. I didn't go to a race. And I cycled through the track in an Ironman race.
I have a question for you, Richard. Like over the weekend, you did a swim around the
Burj Al Arab.
Around the Burj Al Arab. Is that what you do to relax on the weekend?
Yeah, that was so relaxing.
Is going for a swim around the
3 kilometers.
Are you being serious or are you being sarcastic?
No, it's meditation. It's great.
It's meditating. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about
with
that.
With a group,
because
we'll try Dubai with about 80 people. But yeah,
okay,
that's a casual Sunday morning for them.
Oh my gosh. Okay, right. Okay, the ex-CEO of Disney, Bob Chapek, I hope I'm pronouncing
Chapek,
that.
yeah.
Chapek.
It was Bob Iger and Bob Chapek. Bob Chapek ran the parks and no one knew about him for 30 years. And then he got Iger's job and then he got fired like about 80 months later.
Yeah, exactly. He got fired in 2022. These are his first public comments. He told CNBC he didn't see the strategic logic in ESPN bringing on more minority partners. So just to give people some context, they fired him, Disney, because of complaints about his leadership style, bad earnings, and he just said strategically, I don't really see a benefit in bringing on yet another minority partner into ESPN. Bob Iger, the CEO, told Bob Iger, sorry, okay, you correct me with English, I correct you with Arabic. It's
perfect, good
it's a compromise. So in July, he said he'd consider selling a minority stake in ESPN to strengthen the sport network's content or technology. It's planning a new direct-to-consumer offering, which he would launch in 2025.
Disney Plus are in the region. They're in the region on their own. They're under the Disney branch here. And Disney's an interesting story. Bob Iger had a run as CEO from 2005 onwards, and the share price went really up. Then when he left and when Chapek came in around the pandemic, it turned sour. They made a big bet on streaming and it hasn't really worked. They lost out on cinema things. The Marvel franchise isn't the hit it is. Nelson Peltz is an activist investor that he's getting in to get more board seats, and people think he wants to get rid of Iger. Iger's tried to retire many times. He's in his mid-70s. And, so Disney's an interesting story. It's this kind of wider thing around streaming and content and where it's going. A few months ago, them and others announced that they were, to solve sports streaming, they're going to come together in a joint venture. So like Comcast and other people who own NFL, NBA.
Yeah.
And people are like, that's a stupid idea. This thing will never work. But there's precedent for it. Like Hulu was a JV between a few others. And now Disney have to buy that from Comcast. So there's things happening there on sports. And, we're seeing some interesting stuff on sports in the region. F1's been fully bought now into Todd and streaming rights under Shahid. And that used to be... Sorry, on the beIN, sorry. Let's segue into the Ngami story because to speed up on time. But so NBC as well, we knew that OSN with OSN Plus merged with Ngami to take them off the stock market. And now NBC are going to come in. So it's all, the Disney Plus, the global story about Disney has competition in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people were saying that this move is meant to kind of block the merger. Some people were saying that. But I don't know, it was a surprise move, but the stock had gone up the day before.
Which we talked about.
We didn't know why. We didn't know why. Now we know why.
People knew why.
People knew why. How? Well, we're not going to answer that question. Okay, interesting for Ngami. Do you think they're still going to delist after this?
So I don't know. I think it's fascinating, right? Because DMS represented Ngami as sales publishing, so digital media services under Shweri Group, who were NBC's sales house in Dubai for many years. So that there was a partnership. So it begs the question, if NBC were interested, they had under the hood of Ngami numbers since day one, since early doors. So why weren't they the ones who did the deal before? Why was it OSN Plus?
Yeah.
So there's something there. Look, you and I love to sort of hypothesize over this stuff and debate over who gets it right first. But I think there could be something in a wider merger. I think NBC could potentially swallow up OSN in the future. Why? Because
that's a great point, because OSN is not doing that well.
No, and Kuwait as a country, in terms of the wider sort of economy, is struggling a little bit at a government level in terms of access to funds. And then the group that own OSN have many ventures, but they've been propping up media for years, and it's becoming less and less lucrative. And if you think of the history of NBC used to have Arabic content and English content, and Shahid is very much an Arabic. It's an Arabic word.
It is.
It's very much an Arabic content.
Shahid means watch. Yeah.
Watch, and it's a very much an Arabic streaming service.
Yeah.
Whereas OSN is very much an English streaming service.
Yes.
It's got HBO. So if you think of NBC2 in the past being English movies, you could see OSN Plus, and then you've got music. So NBC have just recently listed on the Saudi stock market. That means they've got M&A money. Their share price went up 100%. It could be a wider, it could be a wider sort of play to be in that area.
That's a very, very interesting point that you're making. We've got time for one more story. The BBC, is it being squeezed out by online algorithms? So the BBC Director General said he's going to give a speech, and he said British storytelling is at risk of being squeezed out. He's talking about China. He's talking about algorithms. He said we are in danger of the UK's world-class creative industries being undermined and diminishing our unique cultural identity. Wow, the British are talking about diminishing cultural identity. Right. The UK government, so this is interesting, right? But the UK government also ruled out any direct foreign state ownership of a British newspaper in a strongly worded amendment to a law that would basically block Abu Dhabi-backed Redbird IMI's takeover of the Telegraph Media Group.
Yeah, it'll backfire for them. Look, like the whole history of who funds the BBC with content is, the license. So I don't know if everyone knows, but if you buy a television set, you have to pay, to have that television set in your house, you have to pay the government £150 a year. So there's a TV license.
Okay.
And in this region, in other parts of the world, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So now that we don't need to, so the whole public funding for BBC meant that people felt that they owned the programming and it wasn't a commercial entity. And in the history of TV in England, there were never ads on the BBC. And not everyone will know that. There was only ads on BBC World and the international service. So all the ads that ran in the history to England were on ITV and Channel 4 and Sky, never on the BBC. Fascinating, right?
Interesting.
But so the whole commercial model in the BBC is up for grabs. They're obviously dealing with algorithms, aren't we all?
Yes.
And then, wider, like they still have an operation in Media City. They've fallen under a lot of pressure in how they've covered the region over the years and their biasness and stuff like that. There's been a lot of online on BBC Arabic, and the Arabic World Service, the radio shut down, didn't it?
Yes, Arabic and Persian. Yeah, they shut that down a few years ago. But it's interesting. And there was a story about the US and China blocking a ceasefire in Gaza over the weekend. And, all the comments under the post were like, we don't believe you anymore because that's not accurate. Give context, because that deal would allow Israel to go into Rafah. So it's just incredible the way that they don't understand the region either. I think the BBC, they said something the other day about, something like you're not allowed to drink alcohol and Muslims are not allowed to consume alcohol in the UAE. Muslims can now own an alcohol license in the UAE, right? You can go and apply for it and you will get it. It's just so inaccurate. It's really bad journalism. And I actually think they should have taken that Redbird deal, but it's okay. I know a lot of people get offended sometimes when I say, the English, but the Spectator call, Emiratis the Emiratis. They call the Russians the Russians. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I'm not being, I'm not attacking anyone, but we're starting to speak the same language. The region wants respect. That's what Fatih Ghandour said at the Qatar World Web Summit. The region wants respect. Right?
Yeah, and look, on the wider theme about algorithms is you have to embrace it. Like Elon Musk put a tweet out yesterday. I love that all these stories are media, but he basically, someone said that it was the Dogecoin meme account said that the Wall Street Journal traffic is going down, and Elon Musk did a wave, bye, and then everyone on it is like bye, because he's killing off legacy media, you know. And I think, like, I just saw another headline this morning that, like, the rival of Instagram in China is on the way up. Like, we're seeing a TikTok ban in the US kind of coming through. We're seeing such a, on one level, people are getting their news from these social networks and messaging apps.
Yes.
And on the other level, even those legacy media and countries are grappling with how to regulate them and all sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. We've run out of time. Fascinating conversations as always, Richard. Thank you for your time. We know you're busy, so thanks for gracing us with your presence.
The good stories.
No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much. And stream us if you'd like the video version, or listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. And
subscribe to the Smashi Business newsletter as well. And Smashi Business on Instagram. If you like, we're doing a lot more on Instagram at the moment. We have a really good team behind LoveNet, and we're getting really good feedback, but keep the feedback coming.
Please do. Please do. Get
and
in
follow
touch.
Smashi Sports as well. It streams the local UAE sports, futsal, volleyball, handball and basketball. And we're actually next week going to be streaming the MENA Cup, where all the young youth clubs are coming from around the world to Jebel Ali, including Newcastle Youths and things like that.
Wow. Yeah. That's really exciting, actually. You know what? I'll be streaming that. Yeah, I'll be watching that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
You can have a free subscription.
Okay, so thanks.
Anyone else has to pay.
I thought that was a given, but thank you.